So, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for trekking out to CPR for what promises to be a really exciting discussion. We had thought that by today we'd probably be at the end of the saga, but it turns out that there's still one last leg left at 4 o'clock this afternoon, which might change everything, but nevertheless. This has been quite an election, and we were keen to have a more nuanced, detailed, and focused conversation about it. But before I hand over, I also wanted to give you a little bit of background to why we're doing this. Today's seminar is the first in what we are planning as a year-long and potentially longer series in partnership with the Trivedi Center for Political Data at the Ashoka University on Indian politics. The reason we felt it was important for these two institutions to come together to start this dialogue is because of the natak that has become our politics. We felt that it is important to have a space for serious, rigorous, academic, and serious journalistic discussion on what is unfolding in front of us. This is a time of transition and a time of deep change, which is likely to influence the pathway of Indian politics over the next decade or two. And in these polarized times, there are very few spaces for an actually serious conversation, one in which academics, observers, civil society organizations, and others come together to debate and understand what's going on. So that's the focus and that's the purpose of this dialogue series. Today is the first of these series, and we hope to have one a month, certainly in the run-up to the next general elections, which may or may not be in May 2019, potentially a little before. And the idea is not just to focus on the immediate, but also to look back at our past and forecast what we've learned from our past into what our politics is going to look like in the future, and what implications that's going to have for India going forward. I'm very delighted and pleased that the Trivedi Center for Political Data are partnering with us on this exercise, and I'd like to invite Mr. Qureshi to just say a few words on behalf of the center and his thoughts on this new endeavor that we're launching today.
Thank you, Yamini. S.Y. Qureshi is my name. I used to work in the Election Commission. Now I'm with the Trivedi Center for Political Data. It's a unique institution. We are trying to promote data-driven research, policy work in journalism on India's political life. We'll provide quality of... we have seen that the quality of existing public data is either poor or very inadequate, or very proprietary. Some institutions, some individuals which have the data, are very possessive about it. So we decided, therefore, we'll create a setup which will provide all this data in the public domain, use it as you like, and Lok Dhaba is our portal from where you can download anything and use it any way you like. Public institutions do have data, but it is not really presentable, not really usable. A case in point is the Election Commission itself, which is perhaps the generator of the biggest data which is possible. But how user-friendly, how accessible it is the question that we ask. Not that the Election Commission wants to hide it, but it is not in the format. And our concern also is that since we do not want our data to get distorted, so most of our data is only in the PDF format. The researchers find it very difficult. So to convert PDF into the usable data, we have a couple of MOUs with some educational institutions where we provide them raw data. But you will appreciate our fear is that if we make it in the public domain, there are lots of vested interest to distort it. So which is what we cannot afford. So there are situations when, for instance, Francesca of University of Berkeley, she spent months on end to convert the PDF of Election Commission into a usable data. We feel that our data will be usable for researchers, journalists, students and citizens, and in a way we are a kind of a public service. So that is about the TCPD, and I'm very happy to join hands with CPR on this very important idea of year-long conferences. We are missing Gilles Vernier, my brilliant colleague who happens to be traveling, whose idea, who conceptualized this whole center. He asked me to stand in for him. That is the bottom of partnership. But whenever you feel my comments on the recent elections, I'll share some of them.
In the course of the discussion. Thank you very much. And I'd like to just make a special mention to my colleague Nilanjan Sirkar, who is going to wow you with his fantastic data that will help us unpack in the middle of all the natak, what is the governor doing, not doing, where are the MLAs, are they getting 100 crores or 150 crores? We forgot, I think, to really fully, deeply understand the implications of this election, and Neelan will set us up by sharing his analysis and setting the frame for the conversation. And a special thanks to our wonderful panelists, Manisha, Vasu, Sugata, who've taken the trouble to be here with us today. And we hope that we can keep you involved in our dialogues as we go forward. So over to you, Neelan, to get the proceedings going. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you all for coming. My job here is actually quite easy in that I just have to give the explainer. All the people who are giving opinions will be the panelists. I just will give you a very simple background of sort of where things stand and what we can tell from the election data. So as Yamini mentioned, I mean, we would like this to be sort of a dialogue format. So I will be going through some data. Any questions you have, please break in. This is not a lecture. And you know, I'm going to sort of speak for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll start the panel in earnest. So this is what the assembly constituency map of Karnataka's 2013 elections looked like. Blue here is Congress, green is the Janata Dal Secular, JDS, and saffron is BJP. These are sort of natural colors. This is, by the way, pulled off of the HT website, the Hindustan Times website. I should give credit to. This is what it looks like in 2018. So it's fairly obvious that the BJP has made major inroads. The Congress has lost a lot of seats. The JDS hasn't, right? And you can see that there's quite a bit of constant there's a constant seat share there in the south of Karnataka. What we will talk a little bit more about, the coast of Karnataka, the area there toward the center and the north is where the coastal areas have a certain Hindu-Muslim polarization situation, and central and north of Karnataka have a certain ethnic population, the Lingayat population, who can sort of help explain why this map has changed the way that it has. So I'm going to go through some very, very basic sort of background of what's happened in Karnataka and some basic data as to how we can think about what's happened and what explains this kind of change. So before I sort of get into the data, I want to just talk about something that I saw from our field notes. I do not speak Kannada. So this is a picture actually of my colleague, Pranav Kutaya, who's sitting right here, and he does speak Kannada. So, you know, it's important to give credit where credit is due, and when we are doing our field work, sometimes we can speak a language, sometimes we can't. And one of the things that is very important when you work with electoral data, like we are here, is to understand what is actually happening at the constituency level. For those of you that know Karnataka, you know that it is, local politics is extremely complicated. It's an extremely complicated state with a very complicated history. Only 65% of the population speaks Kannada as its first language, according to the census. So it has many, many different linguistic groups. In fact, when I show you the regional composition a little bit later, you'll see that the names of the regions themselves refer to places in other states and other languages. So just to give you a sense of just how complex it is when we are thinking about analyzing identity and understanding politics, here's a quote from a piece that Pranav and I published in Hindustan Times on voting day, actually. So Dalit voting presents a much more fractured picture. In a village in Haveri district, a middle-aged Dalit farmer told us that although he appreciated many of Siddaramaia's welfare schemes, he was worried about local power structures. Siddaramaiah is a Kuruba leader and can be very partial to Kurubas. Since there are many Kurubas in this village, if BJP wins here, we might be able to reduce their influence. To add to the complication, there's enmity with another nearby Dalit community. The other Dalit community thinks that we have come up through reservations at their expense. If they feel that we're going to vote for the BJP, they will definitely vote for the Congress. So this is the kind of complexity we're dealing with when we're trying to think about identity, even just in a single village. Now think about trying to aggregate up and trying to analyze elections in a grander sense. So I want people to have this image. We will have our panelists being able to give us a little more detail about what we see on the ground. But this is the kind of texture that we're talking about. And it's actually a far more complicated state than many other states that we study in India when it comes to elections. So, for those of you who don't have a background with Karnataka politics, I'm going to give a 2-minute background. It is incredibly messy, incredibly complicated. I'm just going to start in 2011. Yediyurappa was the chief minister for BJP in 2011. He resigned under scandal. He felt not defended by the senior leaders of the party. In revenge, he started his own party, the KJP, in 2012 actually, and the basic aim of that party was for him to take his own sort of social group with him, his own community with him, which is the Lingayats, a very powerful, dominant community in northern and central Karnataka. The Lingayats had been a part of the BJP base, and so the implication was that by forming the KJP, there was a line sort of drawn right through the middle of BJP's base. BJP's base split, and Congress won the election in 2013. Siddaramaiah became the chief minister, and he enacted a number of popular welfare schemes. We often refer to his own electoral strategy as the Ahinda strategy. It is an acronym in Kannada for backwards, minorities, and Dalits. So it's sort of a backward type coalition. And it's actually not a strategy that is due to him. It's due to a former chief minister, Devraj Urs. I'm sure speakers can talk more about that. But the idea was to create a backward caste and class coalition against dominant groups like the Vokaligas and the Lingayats. The Vokaligas are a population that tends to vote for the Janata Dal Secular, the JDS. Now, shortly before this election, Yediyurappa came back. He folded his KJP party back into the BJP and became the CM face. Siddaramaiah tried to split Yediyurappa's Lingayat community by according some subset of the Lingayats minority status. So this is the 2-minute breakdown of what has happened over the last few years, for those of you that have not been following. You will see that all of these things reverberate in the data that I'm going to present. And so any questions anyone has, feel free to ask. Okay, so I want to start by being a little bit contrarian right from the very beginning. This is data provided by TCPD, and this is mapping the vote shares for the JDS, which is the gray line, the BJP, which is the saffron line, and the Congress, which is the blue line. And the standard story is that you have a lot of anti-incumbency in Karnataka. Nobody can hold on to power. There's incredible instability. That is true. I mean, if we just look at who wins. But if you look at vote shares from 2004 onwards, you see that they're actually remarkably stable for the JDS and the Congress. And they're not as stable for the BJP, but that's only because in 2013, Yediyurappa splits away and forms his own party. They come back, and you see that 2018 looks a lot like 2008, back when Yediyurappa's back. So in fact, we're talking about a state that, despite on the face of it looking like a lot of anti-incumbency, a lot of electoral volatility, at least in terms of vote shares, is an incredibly stable state. And the reason why this matters is that as we start talking about coalitions, and I'll talk about it a lot today, the fact that parties have stable vote shares and stable bases makes coalition ability much more likely. right? Voters are not jumping between parties as much. So the first sort of thing that I want to talk about is that, if we have three parties that are getting a sufficient amount of vote share, we're talking about a scenario in which there can be some kind of miscoordination, right? So what we tend to think is that in any first-past-the-post electoral system, like what we have in India, is that there will be two major parties and there will be two important candidates at the constituency level. And so if voters are being very strategic, they'll never vote for a candidate who has no chance of winning. They'll vote for some candidate who has some chance of winning in the constituency. When there are three parties that people are devoted to, that logic falls apart. People can vote for a third party, even though that party has no chance of winning. Now, one thing that we wanted to sort of bring to the fore here is that while the JDS is very, very popular in South Karnataka, which is where there's a large Vokalika population, they often play spoiler in the rest of Karnataka. And it's not something that people talk about much, but the JDS, in a genuine sense, is a kingmaker, not only because it wins some seats and needs to form a coalition with another party, but also because it ruins the electoral chances of the other two parties. And so in South Karnataka, it wins 24 seats here, so there's a total of 37 seats that the JDS wins. It has an alliance with BSP and wins one more seat. And it's only a spoiler in 4 seats. But you can see that in, I believe, 39 seats, it is a spoiler in the rest of the 5 regions of Karnataka. And a spoiler here is defined as any party that finishes third or lower, but could have pushed a second place party over the line and into the lead. So it is in a genuine sense, a spoiler. And you just see how much, especially in Bombay, Karnataka, Central Karnataka, and Hyderabad, Karnataka, in these 3 areas, where we see that the JDS is a spoiler in a large number of seats. What's interesting about these seats is this is exactly where the Lingayat population is very, very large. So the other sort of story I told you about is that there's this very funny structural break that happens with the BJP. The KJP and Yediyurappa leave in 2013 and they come back for this election. So the other question we have is, what happened with the Lingayats in this election? Yediyurappa came back.
Just to interrupt for a second, is there a breakup of who they're a spoiler for?
There is. So actually, there's no serious bias there. Almost 50-50 spoiling BJP and Congress.
Oh. Interesting. One would assume they're more of a spoiler for the Congress. The spoiler for the
Right. Spoiler for
Transferred votes to the BJP, looks like
Right.
where they were not very strong, especially in Bombay, Karnataka.
Are you saying it's actually 50-50?
But that's overall. I mean, in certain places, certainly in the Lingayat belt, you'll see a more complicated thing where they really hurt the Congress. Now, what I've done here, this is a very complicated graph, so I'll explain it. The KJP vote share in 2013 is the x-axis. So this is how much Yediyurappa's party, how much vote share it got in 2013. And the y-axis, the vertical axis, is how much vote share the BJP and the Congress gained between 2013 and 2018. So the x-axis, the KJP share, is a pretty good proxy for where the Lingayats live. And you can see that as KJP's share goes up, the BJP's difference between 2013 and 2018 goes up. And that's the saffron colored line. Right? And that makes sense because we know that a lot of the Lingayats vote for BJP. And it seems that Yediyurappa came back to the BJP, so most of the Lingayats came back to the BJP. But we can also use this graph to test whether the splitting strategy worked at all. If the splitting strategy had worked at all, then it should be the case that Congress would have gained some vote share where KJP had been powerful and where the Lingayats had been powerful. What you can see is that this line is almost completely flat along the sea. So it had zero electoral benefit for the Congress party to try to split the Lingayats. It also had zero electoral benefit where there were no Lingayats. So it's just a completely flat line. So it's not that there was anti-incumbency. It's not that there was pro-incumbency. It was just sort of kind of the same thing everywhere. When we look at the saffron-colored line, even when there's no KJP vote share, I'm looking here, you can see that the intercept is shifted up. And what this suggests is that even when there weren't many Lingayats, the BJP has performed better than it has in the past. So call it mobilization effects, call it a Modi effect, call it media effects, whatever it is, the BJP in general is a few percentage points better all across the board, and where there are Lingayats, it's even better than that. And so when we look back to a map like this, a lot of that orange is where there are lots of Lingayats. And so that's where the BJP is just gaining a huge amount of vote share. It's not that the Congress lost vote share, it's just that the BJP gained a lot of it. So the next set of questions we have are, well, there was this identity-based backward coalition strategy, the Ahinda coalition. So one of the popular media narratives has been that, oh, the Ahinda coalition failed because the Congress party lost. And what I'm going to show you is that's not actually what the data suggests. So what I've done is I've broken up the constituencies by whether they're in a district that is above the median percentage of Muslims or below the median percentage of Muslims. And what you can see is that the Congress actually gains about 3 percentage points in vote share in places that are above the median percentage of Muslims. I've done the same thing for scheduled castes, and again you see that the Congress gains 4 percentage points in vote share, where we're above the vote share, above the median percentage of scheduled castes. And in each case, it's not gaining much where we're below the median. Right? One thing you notice in each of these graphs is that the BJP's vote share is going up hugely in each of these areas. So that again gives us a narrative. It's not that the Congress did badly, it's that the BJP did much, much better. Okay. So
You don't have a slide on the PCs, OBCs.
yeah, that I'm saving for the I'm saving for the panelists. So I don't have any data on the OBCs because I will tell you right now that this data is from the census. The census does not collect data on the OBCs. Thankfully, our panelists you will find out that a lot of what happened in this election can be explained by some of the things that happened with the backward community, and our panelists have a lot of information about that. So one of the big questions we have is, what would have happened if JDS and Congress had formed a pre-poll alliance rather than trying to tie up afterwards? So I've just run a few basic models here. So the baseline actually should be 115, but whatever, 115, 116, is if JDS and Congress simply don't add each other's vote share, just win the seats that they've already won. Then they win 150 seats if they fully transfer each other's vote share across the constituency from what they got in this 2018 election. If there's a 5% swing, and let me explain what that means. That means that JDS and Congress, where they are, they lose 2.5% of the vote share, and that 2.5% goes to BJP. So there's a 5% swing. They still win 140 seats. If there's a 10% swing, which is a huge amount, they still win 130 seats. So there is at least some, basic evidence that a pre-poll alliance would have performed very, very well in this election. And as I said, that has to do a lot with the fact that there's a stable vote share, and that vote share sort of spreads across the state much more than people realize. There are questions about how well these parties can coordinate. Of course, this is just an underlying model, and perhaps they hate each other on the ground and they can't win any seats. But there's some basic evidence that actually a pre-poll alliance would have worked pretty well here. So I just want to end with this sort of very, very quick thing. We're coming up on 12. So one of the things, so I've given a claim for why a regional party and Congress getting together can perhaps cause a lot of consternation for the BJP. But let me give now the BJP side of things. One thing that we're starting to notice with the BJP is that everywhere in the most recent elections, post-2014, you're getting a large amount of voting for the major parties. That is to say, unaligned voters that are sort of wasting their vote, voting for independent candidates who have no chance of winning, they're now voting for one of the winning candidates or one of the winning parties. And almost all of that vote is actually going to the BJP. So this is just showing the Congress plus BJP plus JDS vote shares, and 2008 is 88%. 2013, obviously because of KJP, it drops 76, 77%. It again comes up to about 92.5% 2018. Now you may think that's a small difference, but 4 or 5% vote share for one party is a lot, right? This is what it looks like in UP. Same sort of phenomenon we see if we track this across elections. For the major parties, here are Congress, BSP, SP, and BJP. Now, this is a general phenomenon that we've been seeing with the BJP, and I just want to end with this one thought, and it's a way to think about what may be happening in 2019. Where the BJP is able to get out unaligned voters that don't feel like they're connected to the system, that is precisely where they do well. They're not actually a party that's converting the other side's base. They're a party that's picking up voters that don't feel like they're part of the system. And the best evidence we have of that is actually the 2014 election. If I look at constituencies that registered less than a 5% percentage point increase in turnout between 2009 and 2014, the BJP only won 24% of those constituencies in 2014. If it had more than a 5 percentage point increase in turnout, it won 81% of those constituencies. And you don't have to do these crazy, I have some crazy stats from all day, no one cares. But you don't even have to do these numbers. You can just look at a map. Where things are more red is where there was a turnout increase, and where the map is saffron is where the BJP won. There's almost a 1-to-1 correlation between the two maps, right? The only difference is something weird happened in Orissa. There's a lot of increase in turnout in Orissa, but the BJP still systematically lost. But otherwise, it's almost a perfect relationship. And so there's a lot of data nowadays to suggest that this version of the Modi party, whether it is Modi's popularity, whether it's mobilization, whether it's a financing advantage, is really bringing out voters who've not really been connected to either party and having them vote for the BJP. And so with that, I'll leave it, and I'll go ahead and start the panel. Okay, so we have a very interesting panel today. I think we've tried to put together people who really know a lot about this electoral context, spent time in the field, have spent time talking to voters in Karnataka. As we know, in Delhi, we don't often know what's going on in the south. So hopefully our esteemed panelists can help us in this regard. So I'm just going to introduce our panelists very, very briefly. Most of you already know them, so I don't have to say too much. I'm going to start directly to my left and work my way out. Our first panelist is Sugatas Srinivasan. He was for many years with Outlook. He's also been, for those of you who followed the media space, he is someone who comments quite frequently on Karnataka. He's been editorial director of AsiaNet, editor-in-chief of Vijay Karnataka, which is the largest Kannada language newspaper, and is currently co-founder and editorial director of The State. So, a lot of media presence. Next to him is Manisha Priyam. She is associate professor at NUEPA, the National University for Education, Planning, and Administration, but most of us know her as one of the best field researchers and ethnographers that's out there, who is constantly sort of encouraging us to go in the field, giving us deep insights about how voters behave, how voters think. She's a political analyst who shows up on television quite often and also in academic circles. She is a very, very well-regarded academic in our circles. And finally, we have Srinivasan Jain, who's a managing director at NDTV, but many of you have... managing editor at NDTV. That would be nice. Exactly. But many of you have seen him on television and have seen him on any number of programs. So I'll just go ahead and get the panel started. So I think, Sugata, I'd like to start with you, and I want this to be a discussion. So I will be leading the discussion for now, but if there are questions from the audience that are pressing, I can take them. Otherwise, we will hold them for about a half hour. So there's a lot I didn't cover in this presentation, because there's a lot that we don't have data on, and that is with respect to caste. And we know that caste is far more complicated than what I can explain with census data. So I was wondering if you could give us some insight into how you think that caste played out and how identity played out in this election.
Thank you, Nilanjan. Okay. So I would like to start with one of the slides that you showed, and you said that the Ahinda thing is part of the popular narrative now, and it's because that failed and therefore Siddaramaiah lost. But one slide that was missing there was the slides of the backward classes. So, if you look at the number of backward classes in Karnataka, I can just give this to you, maybe you can keep this. This is 103 backward classes are listed. 2A, under the 2A category, there are 103 categories. And very interestingly, the last caste that was added to this was in 2013, and that was the Arasu community, to which Devraj Aras belonged. See, when Devraj Aras was the Chief Minister of the state between 1972 and 1979, he was considered a forward community person. But, he came from such a poor background, in a sense, basically people doing agriculture. The Wadayas are different, the Arasus are aristocrats, but then you know how the aristocrats are in most of these places, So Aras was considered a forward community person, but then by 2013 his community had been added into the backward class list. So that says a lot. So of these 103 castes that have been listed there are only 2 castes, 3 we can say, because Aras was, if you consider Aras also as someone who was benefited, and he was the only one who benefited from that community. There has been nobody, not a single MLA elected from the Aras community. That's a tragedy. It's a micro-minority community of about 10 to 12,000 people, and mostly around Mysore, not Mysore, but around Mysore. Piriyapatna is one concentration. Then you see a few other people in up north, in Anegundi and other places, but they are not designated as Arasus. They are designated as Kshatriyas. There are at least 6 Kshatriya communities you will see in that list. And the most financially very resourceful among the Kshatriyas are the Raju Kshatriyas. They are the biggest builders, of public properties, dams and such, are all Raju community people. The people who own the maximum engineering colleges, medical colleges. It's again a micro-minority community, but that community has a bit of a Telugu thing in it, because it's from the Vijayanagar, Anegundi, Ballari belt. So, and most of the rich Raju Kshatriyas who made a name in Karnataka today crossed over from Chittor and Nellore areas. So, if you look at the backward class list, only 2 communities have politically been very, very powerful for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And those 2 communities are Idiga community in the same order, Idigas and Kurubas. See, Kurubas till about the 80s were seen as a kind of an extension of the Okkaliga community. There was no distinction, they had no separate identity. It was only in post-80s, early 90s that they formed their own seminary. They nominated their own pontiff. See, Karnataka is again a very strange case, because sociologically it's very, very interesting. It's the only state where all communities have seminaries and have pontiffs, including the Dalits, including the untouchable Dalits. So it's a very strange state, as Nilanjan rightly pointed out. It's a very complicated state. So these 2 communities, Idigas and Kurubas, have benefited the maximum. And that leaves out, if you remove 2 out of 103, so 101 communities have sort of been in a sea kind of a situation. Why Devraj Aras performed extremely well in 72 and 78 is because he consolidated this 103 communities, 102 communities then, and identified people like, say, Veerappa Moili's community, which is a small community called Devadigas. You may just find about 15-20,000 people from that community. Dharam Singh's community, 6,000 to 7,000. Rajputs, by the way, are backwards in Karnataka. They are not. See, only his son has been elected, and he is the only BC who has been elected this time. And there's one other person, but then 2 people. If you consider Rajputs forward here, they're backward there. And Ajay Singh has been elected from Jevargi, and there's another person called Narayan Rao from the Koli Samaj who has been elected from Basav Kalyan. And other than these people, everybody from the backward classes who's been elected is a Kuruba. That's the community that Siddaramaiah belongs to. Until Siddaramaiah came to dominate the backward class scene, the Idigas were dominating this scene. That is Bangarappa and his community. If you remember, when Bangarappa broke away from the Congress, it was exactly like the KJP breaking away from the BJP, and he dented 45 to 50 seats for the Congress. And the Congress's worst ever performance in 1994 was when Bangarappa formed KJP. So Bangarappa was seen as a kind of a pan-backward class leader, and unfortunately Siddaramaiah is not seen as a pan-backward class leader. And Siddaramaiah should have, in the last 5 years, tried to sort of increase his credibility among the other backward classes, which he did not do. He did not even, pick a single leader from any of those communities to nominate them, say, to the upper house or whatever. So he thought, because his community, there is a demographic advantage to the Kurubas. They are spread across Karnataka, unlike the Lingayats and the Vokaligas, who are in pockets. The Kuruba community plays a supporting role in at least 65 constituencies across Karnataka. So if, say, a Lingayat has to win in Basav Kalyan or in Sindagi or Sindhanur, he needs those 10,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 Kuruba votes to win. So he thought, it's enough to play that card. And I think there was also community pressure not to allow anybody else to sort of rise. This prompted Devegowda in 2005 to seek for an internal reservation within the backward classes. Because he made this point that only the Idigas, and that is when Siddaramaiah broke away from the Congress, from the Janata Dal, secular, he made this point that Idigas and Kurubas are dominating the backward class vote share. So why should we not have internal reservation? So that was anyway spiked, and so that should explain why the Ahinda thing failed. The Muslims have, like the BJP has been accusing Congress of, getting only the Muslim vote or the minority vote. That has happened. The Dalits have not been. Again, Dalits is a very interesting phenomenon. Dalits, again, there are, according to the Sadashiva Commission, which was commissioned in 2006, and they submit a report in 2012 to Sadanand Gowda, who was then the chief minister. They identify 101 SCs, 101 SC communities. And there are a mix of touchables and untouchables there, and there are also nomadic communities called Lambanis, all of them there. So not all of them are loyal to the Congress. See, there is a deep division in the last 10 years between the left and the right Dalits. The left Dalits are in hierarchy below the right Dalits. And if I need to give you examples of who a right Dalit is, you will recognize Mallikarjun Kharge. He is a right Dalit. They are called Holayas in the local whatever. And then there are Muniappa, who was a long time railway minister in the UPA cabinet. He is a left Dalit. His daughter has won this time for the first time in KGF. I think she is the only left Dalit that the Congress has now, and she'll definitely be a minister. So that's how you look at it. And the left Dalits, for a very strange reason, have voted for Yediyurappa from 2008 on to the BJP and Yediyurappa, and more, they've been very loyal to Yediyurappa, which is very, strange and inexplicable. And the Congress has done nothing to reach out. There was actually one very interesting viral video of Rahul Gandhi eating pakodas in a dhaba when he was on this Janashirwad Yatra. And the viral video was because he was eating pakodas. But actually there's one very interesting detail there in that video. A lot of people don't seem to recognize, where he is looking out and calling, Kharge is sitting in front of him. And he's saying, where is Muniappa ji? Where is Muniappa ji? Call him, call him. And Muniappa walks in and he gives a pakoda to him. So Muniappa is a left Dalit, and he was making it very obvious that he's trying to balance these two. Siddaramaiah at one point wanted Muniappa to become the KPCC president because he was not having a good relationship with Parmeshwar, who is a right Dalit again. And Parmeshwar again is not even seen as a Dalit. That's the strange part, because his family converted into Buddhism 40 years ago. His father converted into Buddhism 40 years ago. If you go to his institution in Tumkur, you don't see any Dalit totems at all. You will see a huge Buddha statue placed there. So he is not considered, and he is married a Brahmin, by the way. So he is not a typical Dalit that the Congress has given representation to. If you look at, I'm telling you all this because, that's how politics is done and read and understood at the local level. So Ahinda was a failure because Siddaramaiah did not take care of his own backyard. He sort of somehow the traditional Congress vote sort of saw a bit of Muslims vote in and Dalits come in. But the backwards, only the Kurubas voted for him. And interestingly, Idigas, the two sons of Bangarappa contested from a Janata Dal ticket and a BJP ticket. And the guy who contested from the BJP ticket won in Saga, in Soraba, that is Bangarappa's constituency. So that's a very interesting way in which the backward classes have fizzled out. And if the Congress does not take care of this, and why it's important to take care of these 102 communities, is because nearly 38% of the population is with these assorted communities. I'll stop there and probably I'll come in.
So thank you very much for that. I mean, obviously, what I could not cover with data, very, very detailed explanation of just how complicated caste politics is. I'm gonna throw it to Manisha real fast because oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I was just saying that on the subject of caste, if you want to put up that slide, which actually gives you a breakup of how many members of each community have won from across different parties. So this is something which, funnily enough, a Congress leader just sent to me on WhatsApp this morning as a way of making his case for becoming a deputy chief ministerial candidate. So he's a Lingayat. Well, I'll just say this much: he's a Lingayat, and he's making the case that Lingayats should be given a chance to become deputy chief minister. He's done a whole analysis, which I can't share that, but it just gives you the number of each each community. It's not going to happen. That's it.
टेम्परेचर ज़्यादा हो गया, ज़्यादा टेम्परेचर में नहीं चलते.
Yeah. Okay, so while this is loading, let me sort of ask a more general question, right? I mean, I think we find that in general, one of the successes of the BJP has been to bring a lot of the OBCs into its fold. Perhaps across states, it's something that we see in UP and so on and so forth. Do you think that an identity-based strategy can win if you cannot win the lion's share of the OBC votes? Is it possible at all? Oh, we got it. Okay, good.
Okay, so now, so this is telling you the breakup of the current assembly caste-wise and party-wise, right? So the top VL is Veerashaiva Lingayat, which is basically an umbrella term for Lingayat. Now, I also have some data on how many candidates from each community were fielded by party. So it will give you an idea of both how much importance different parties give to different castes and also their strike rate. I mean, we don't have time to do a proper calculation. So the Congress, according to data I have, fielded 45 Lingayats and 16 have won, which is a strike rate of about 35%. So that's the overall strike rate of the Congress, like 78 out of 222 seats, so 35%. So their Lingayat candidates are winning at about the same strike rate. The BJP fielded 69 Lingayats. So, Congress 45, BJP almost 70, and 38 have won. I don't know what the strike rate there is. BJP fielded 37 Vokalikas and 8 have won. Congress fielded 42. Kurubas is in. Okay, so here's what I have, which this particular chart doesn't really explain. I have the Congress fielding 17 Kurubas, of which 9 have won, and the BJP only fielded 6 Kurubas. So that just gives you an idea of both in terms of like the extent to which different parties give weightage to different castes, and also in terms of the win strike rate. For Dalits, Now, there's a bit of an anomaly here because it shows a total of 36 SC, MLAs, but there are only 35. So 35 are the total number of reserve seats. So maybe one SC has one outside of a reserve seat. So there you find that the BJP has actually improved from last time. So the Congress gets 12, the BJP 16. Or from Rane Benur. Okay. Okay, so just last quick point. So if you look at the SC, so the BJP last time had won only 7 reserve seats, and now that's jumped to 16. The Congress had won 17, that's down to 12. The JDS was 10, and that's down to 6. So the BJP seems to be gaining Dalit votes, or at least Dalit from reserve seats from both the Congress and the JDS.
Which was also the case also in 2008, when 31 out of 35 SC seats went to Yediyurappa. 2008 elections.
Right.
When, interestingly, Mallikarjun Kharge was the KPCC president, and the maximum reserved seats went to the BJP, which is a irony of sorts.
Right.
So Manisha, you spent some time, especially in Mysore and Bangalore, and I'm sure you engaged voters on what they thought of Siddaramaiah. And I was wondering, did you hear critiques that are very similar to what Sugata has mentioned? Did you hear anything else? What can you tell us something about what your interactions were on that front?
A lot different from what you do, and he's also very deeply embedded. And I'm basically a political economist of development. That's my work at the LSE and here. And my grounding in Karnataka has been for the last 2 or 3 years, because I've started looking at old public institutions that work, and I'm looking at the University of Mysore as one of the cases, especially the Maharaja College Mysore, and I'm engaged in ethnography of that. But I also, on the side from 2012 onwards, have been doing electoral ethnographies done in about 8 states now, and for 2 panchayat elections. Professor Mukulika Banerjee has done this for the general elections, and what I do is I've taken the scale down. And taking the scale down has helped me and the scholarship that I produce along with my collaborators in 2 very important ways. That the important politics of development, for which we talk about Nitish Kumar, or that on the demand, on the supply side, so to say, Narendra Modi starts his pitches by saying, Vikasvad ko vanvas diya, ya Vikasvad karenge. So his critique of state governments also starts from this platform. So I would have something to say about these in Bangalore and in Mysore. I've been in there as a field worker for the last, from 2016 onwards, about 5 months of total work is what I have. And what I essentially do is speak to people. When I move to the field, I don't necessarily move to the field thinking the person in front is a Vokaliga or a Lingayat or a scheduled caste, left hand, right hand. Though I must admit that before I went to Karnataka, Jim Maynor, who's been my external supervisor at the LSE, he'd been grounding me for the last 5 years, saying, stop this now, this is Karnataka. And I used to tell him, I'm a Bihari, you can't teach me caste. And he said, well, you need to go to Karnataka. And for most other states, I would come back and I would be arguing with my colleagues at CSDS saying, you postcode data and you're imposing identities. This was a Vikasvad vote. People will have an origin. When he started saying, G. Parameshwar is actually not a pure bred, he's converted and he's married outside. And anywhere else in the country, in Bihar, for example, I would have been arguing, saying, why are you post-coding G. Parameshwara as a Dalit? Maybe he's an education person. I've seen him in 2003 as leading the higher education task force in Karnataka, etc., etc. Now, what happens in Karnataka is exactly the opposite. So I'm going to present my data in 3 or 4 minutes, just around 3 or 4 questions. So you will find that the fieldwork I do is clustered around some of these things. And those are the important questions that everybody wants an answer to. Let me again say that I didn't approach the field saying, I'm going to find a Vokaliga and ask him, but I did find one. So in Mysore, when I reached the University of Mysore, for my field work in 2016. I didn't know. I went there as a state guest because I also work at the NUPA, and I had the official car, and I was at the Maharaja College, Mysore. And for the ethnography, I was given lists of how many entered, what was the retention rate, etc. But soon enough, when they realized that I had a punch for hardcore research, the real stories then began to come, and they come with history. So Karnataka, even if it's voting now, and if it's about agency, always talks about history, which is right there. So Maharaja College reaches back and tells me about their one piece of history, saying the anti-Brahmin movement. Radha Krishnan was a lecturer here. He didn't get promoted. And I said, oh my God, he didn't get promoted. It was the anti-Brahmin movement that pushed him out. But I can tell you that anti-Brahmin movement was an implant from Tamil Nadu. It's not our movement. And Radha Krishnan's chariot, we pushed him out of the university, but his chariot, the horses were opened, and the students pulled his chariot till the station. So that was my first story. But there were other stories to unravel, and these are what led me to the elections. The other story was that when I started really digging deep and diving deep, I realized that the Vokaligas, who had been the net beneficiary of the institutional resources in Mysuru for the last quarter century, were now the strongest critics of the Congress party. And the criticism of the Congress party was twofold. The criticism of the Congress party was, and it wasn't about the last Congress chief minister, it was about H.R. Bhardwaj, the governor. Because H.R. Bhardwaj epitomized Brahmin on the one hand and the Dalit combination on the other. And I realized in Mysuru that after the Bommai judgment and the Sarkaria Commission, when the role of the governor had been settled in the arena of discretionary politics in government making, the role of the governor in higher education discretion had been overwhelmingly expanded. And the University of Mysuru, that was celebrating its centenary year, had, as I would say a classic samjhauta, had Kuvempu, the poet laureate, was also a Vokkaliga. I shouldn't say this, he's considered Karnataka's poet laureate. So Kuvempu sits outside in a cane wicker chair outside the university. But the vice chancellor then was a Dalit, and every Vokkaliga who mattered in the university told me that H.R. Bhardwaj and the Dalits combined to loot this university. The story of the loot of the university was even further though, and as I went on and dug deep, I had been instructed by my gurus in the West that I must look out for the Dalit issues in the university, because the students knocking at the doors of the university are actually first generation Dalit learners. But when I asked my hosts, they said, dirty people, you should not go, madam. Your research will not benefit. We will give you figures of educational finance. But for a week thereafter, they wouldn't even give me the address. If I would ask for names, they would say, dead, madam. 1 decade ago, dead. So then I turned around and I said, look, dead or alive, I know about this person. This was, someone I knew about, Professor C. Parvatamma. When they heard the name C. Parvatamma, was the first full woman Dalit professor at the University of Mysuru, who did her field work under M.N. Srinivasa's supervision, but also attacked M.N. Srinivas in the Indian Sociological Association meeting at Patna and asked him that, M.N., when you did your field work, did you stay in the Brahmin Agrahara? And the Remembered Village's most important critique is from CP. Now, when I go to CP's house, finally the Vokkaliga hosts in the university said, okay, madam, car we will give you. You go on your own. We don't want to come with you. So that's the level of untouchability about a lady who's departed about a decade ago. Now, when I reach there, I find Parvatamma is a rational intellectual. Tells you a lot about the status of Dalits there. The Dalits there are really not the Dalits. Now, here I come to the second political point I'm making. All along in the political commentaries, chaps to my right, mainly men, would keep saying, Siddha has played a Nitish politics. He's got the Ati Pichda. And I would actually try and compare the visuals of the Ati Pichda, the Musars, with whom I worked for over 25 years in Bihar, with what I had seen in Karnataka. Amma, no match. The Dalit intellectualism is a solid intellectualism in Karnataka. For every person who told me or who I asked, Kurba knew, they would say, Amma, you academic, you politician. I would say, no academic, no politics. They hadn't still seen me on Coming on India Today or whatever. So then they told me, Amma, Karnataka politics, as I'm getting the lessons here, and I will trail him for sure when next week I'm there in Bangalore. They tell me, Amma, you write. And I was looking at the pages here, I can't find it. I got to know the subdivisions within the Kurbas. And they said, Amma, we'll give you interviews with better Kurbas. And they will tell you how Siddharamaya's Kurba dominates the better Kurba. So one important takeaway was, look for visuals of domination. Look for critique. And I would have to hide and write my diary because the Vocaligas would constantly be, Amma, what are you writing about us? I'm not writing about you. I'm writing about how you actually, even if the Dalits have been included in the public institutional arena, how you actually shunted them out. So the Vocaliga jostling up until, and I tracked it, from 2016 June confirmed in Mysuru, and when I would meet the middle caste in Mandya, the confirmed lesson to me was, Amma, Modi. And I had then appeared on a television program on something or the other, some of them saw it, and then they called me to say, correct madam, Modi Shah. And this was 2016 June. And look at how that was to change around the time of the vote. So the Vocaligas actually built a strong critique of the Congress party under H.R. Bhardwaj and then under Siddaramaiah. One a governor, the other a chief minister. So the Vocaligas knew how to do dominant caste politics very well, and the Kurbas were no match to the kind of intellectual critique and on the ground critique that the Vocaligas were able to build of Siddaramaiah. Now, the second question that I asked, which I would as a researcher, the welfare card. I mean, literally, the bag of goods that Siddaramaiah had opened up would be good for the severely disadvantaged anywhere. This is the field work that I've done in Bihar all along. This is the work that I did with Mrs. Dixit as the chief minister. I worked with her government for a while. And then I saw how the failures of what she was trying to do also led to the rise of the Aam Aadmi Party. Now, in Karnataka, the free milk and the free grain were actually, and I was told once again from Mysuru, that this is the end of Mysore model of politics. Remember, this is Tamil model of politics. Mysore model of politics is to accommodate. And once again to history, Nalwadi Krishnaraj Vodiyar, when Tamil Nadu was doing other things, Nalwadi Krishnaraj Vodiyar had actually asked for inclusion in the public arena. So the free distribution of targeted goods was considered an end of the Mysore model. Now, the good Vikaswadi that Siddha was, the free goods that he was giving on the one hand were targeted at the least disadvantage in the Rawlsian terms. But on the other hand, while he was doing this, he was also playing the Shiv Sena card by doing the Kannada politics. And the evidence for this comes from the fieldwork that I did in Mahadevpura, which is really the outlying flank even of Whitefield, the last rural area, and typically the rural urban that you would look for. And here I found that the Bihari or the Oriya workers, when you spoke to them, they would tell you, this politics working well for us. Free milk, yes, free grains, yes, Siddha is very good for us. But every time there would be what they called a galata in the city. Amma, free दूध तो अच्छा है, पर जब गलाटा होता तो गले किसके कटेंगे? गले तो हमारे कटेंगे. So every time there was an upsurge in Kannada politics, the beneficiaries of the freebies that were coming from the Siddha politics were actually under threat. So Siddha would actually do very well to have one from his flank or one of his friends or allies or whatever, trusted allies, open up a Shiv Sena type party amongst the underclass that would have 100% subscription. Now, the Galata workers were really people of the MLAs, as I was told. In the outlying areas, the MLAs were people with liquor contracts in their hand. And Siddaramaiah could do a Galata in seconds. And even a construction worker would tell me, you are here, Amma, for the next week. This is 2016. And I said, yes. And he said, देखिए अभी जिस दिन सुप्रीम कोर्ट का वर्डिक्ट आएगा ना, हमने किस पे वर्डिक्ट आना है? नदी का पानी में वर्डिक्ट आना है. उस दिन देखो अम्मा, वर्डिक्ट का पहले शहर में गलाटा होता. And they would take me out to places that were Tamil dominated, to Kormangla, etc. Lo and behold, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would be advised to go back because city में गलाटा होता. अम्मा, आप fair है, हम जानता आप तमिल नहीं है, पर शहर में भी गलाटा होता. So there was an underbelly of the city which was on fire that I could see. I'll just conclude this round of the question by saying a couple of things, and that would be that Siddaramaiah riled and made an enemy. Now, just compare and contrast this to Nitish Kumar, who actually targeted just the Paswans, turned them into a category that he would not touch. So he had one excluded category, otherwise Nitish's rule had a rainbow coalition of his actual quiet or chuppa voters were not the extremely backward caste, the upper caste, who feared Lalu Prasad Yadav, were Nitish's strong vote bank. Amongst the OBCs, the Kurmis and the Koiris that are two castes, and I've known them all along as two different castes. The Kurmis were the beneficiaries of the Triveni Sangh and the green revolution of vegetables that happened in Bihar. The Kurmis, the caste to which Nitish Kumar belonged. Now, Koiri is slightly different. Koiris were ML workers, and Nitish's craft actually brought the ultra-left Koiris to the fold of his party. So at the upper caste, the Kurmis and Koiris coming together, the EBCs, and only one enemy image of Ramvilas Paswan. And he kept the electioneering pot rife by saying this is the enemy. Siddaramaiah did quite the opposite. He built the electioneering pot around, keeping the Vocaligas as the enemy. And look at what the enemy figure was doing. In other rounds, I'll tell you that the Vocaliga critique ultimately also combined with the Brahmin critique, and some of the Brahmin voices I will narrate. And in the subsequent rounds, I can come back also to the Lingayat card. The more Siddha played the Lingayat card, the language in which the Lingayat card was enmeshed was surprisingly a language as if the BJP was talking about Hindus. That was the language it was enmeshed. So every time I have an interview and record lots of the so-called intellectuals who were leading the Lingayat card on behalf of Siddaramaiah, including from Jamdar, and he would say from 12th century onwards, actually, the Lingayats are not Hindus. So his Ahinda and not Hindu identity was the exact counter of what the BJP was doing. So in a sense, Siddaramaiah's terming a dominant ally into an enemy image and walking into the trap of turning into a BJP-like election is what really played off against him, but more of it in the other rounds of questioning.
I'd like to, because I want some time for the audience, so I'd like to ask Srinivasan. So let me ask this in a weird way, right? So 2013 Congress won, and 2014 the BJP swept to power. 2008 the BJP did quite well. 2009 the Congress did quite well. And so, does Karnataka matter at all for 2019? Do you think that what we're seeing here at all is in any way going to tell us about what we're going to see a year from now if the election doesn't move up?
Right. First of all, of course, Karnataka matters in as much as any state matters because it has a considerable number of Lok Sabha seats. So, I mean, in a general sense, it does. But I would really sort of approach Karnataka. So, like in every election, there are sort of macro trends, macro narratives, and there are micro narratives, right? So, I think we've got quite granular here. So, let me try to paint some broad brushstrokes, which is what TV anchors are very good at, sweeping generalizations. So one of the things that has always interested me about Karnataka and the broader narrative is how the BJP enters into regions which have traditionally been Congress strongholds, happening across India, and how the Congress cedes space and how the BJP enters. So just consider Karnataka was such a strong Congress bastion that Indira Gandhi actually came all the way and fought in Chikmagalur in central Karnataka in 1978 after the emergency. And Sonia Gandhi came and fought in Bellary in 1999. Today, the MP from Udupi Chikmagalur is a woman called Shobha Karanlaje, who is Yediyurappa's sort of close aide, a very prominent BJP leader, sort of turning herself into a quasi-Hindutva mascot. And the MP from Bellary is Sri Ramulu, who is the aide of these, the Reddy mining barons of Bellary. So that's the shift that you can witness in the past several decades between how, the map, the political geography of Karnataka has changed. Now, without getting into too much detail, how has this happened? And this also tells you something about the BJP's ability to be agile and to be adaptable. So quite apart from the rhetoric of the BJP saying that we're a party of Hindutva, we're a party of clean governance, we don't believe in caste politics, how it actually adapts to state-specific and sub-region-specific challenges, right? So essentially, and Sugata, Manisha, please correct me wherever you feel that I'm going off the grid. But essentially, there were different strategies for the different regions of Karnataka. And again, broad brushstrokes, Hindutva along the coast. So the BJP makes its first entry in the 90s in Udupi, is I think the first municipality it wins. V.S. Acharya, who's a prominent BJP leader, primarily through Hindutva. It plays the Lingayat card for, so it's Hindutva, it's traditional, that's traditional BJP politics. It plays Lingayat card for North and Central Karnataka with Yediyurappa. So it goes from, Hindutva to one caste, one leader. And then for what is called Hyderabad Karnataka, which is sort of northeast Karnataka, this is a traditional Congress JDS bastion. It's got a high percentage of Dalits and tribals. And so the BJP has had a very rough time trying to enter. But there, it brings in the Reddy brothers, who are these mining barons, and Sri Ramalu, who's an aide of theirs, is a tribal leader. So it's a combination of sort of money, muscle, mafia, and sort of backward caste politics. And it breaches that in 2008. So one of the big reasons why the BJP did so well in 2008 was because it actually entered areas outside its comfort zone. It just couldn't go on winning areas where it's already won. It saturated those areas. So these three pivots are what sort of took it to dominance. So that tells you something about both the strengths of the BJP but also the limitations. So in a sense, it's replayed those same three cards this time as well. So it brought back Yediyurappa, it brought back the Reddy brothers, and it tried the same thing again to reasonable success, but not all the way through, which also tells you that some of those cards also are starting to wear out, because the legacy of that 2008 government, the Reddy Yeddi, republic, was bad. It was marked by corruption, and we all know that Yediyurappa had to resign. So it was a risk that the BJP took, a calculated risk, that we are going to play the Reddy card, the Lingayat and Hindutva card. And similarly, the Congress took the Ahinda gamble. So both parties took a gamble and both had limited success. The net result of all of this, though, is something which broadly conforms to what Nilanjan was presenting, and which I tend to agree with, though without the data, to the extent of the data, that the net result is Karnataka has actually become this peculiar three-cornered state, where the default setting for Karnataka may sadly be a situation of hung governments and hung coalitions, right? So to that extent, 2004, which was the first time that we had the BJP actually was the single largest party, and that resulted in a hung scenario, and 2018, I think, are actually the default setting for Karnataka politics. And 2008 and 2013, 2008, the BJP actually sweeps, and then 2013, the Congress wins a clear majority. Those, I think, are anomalies, triggered by, in 2008, there was a kind of sympathy wave for Yediyurappa because Kumaraswamy didn't step down, so he had the advantage of that. And 2013, the KJP split, and the sort of bad legacy of the BJP government helped the Congress. So those were anomalies. Those were quote-unquote wave elections. Not massive waves, but broadly they were waves. A waveless election like this time, with no discernible clear narrative or strand. Siddaramaiah seemed to have done reasonably well. The BJP didn't have anything fantastic to offer. Will, I suspect, lead us to these sorts of scenarios again and again, where you're likely to see this sort of broad, each party broadly consolidating its vote share. As Nilanjan's data showed, they sort of start to plateau out, I think, out of 2004. And so, you're going to end up with this kind of scenario. So, maybe I'll leave it there. I just wanted to make a quick point about, this ends up sounding like not much has changed in terms of parties and strategies. But I would say that the one thing which I think many of us reporting this election noted as terms of a change, I think the biggest change was as far as the Congress was concerned. I think the manner in which the Congress ran its campaign, particularly Rahul Gandhi's proactiveness, is something which is kind of an interesting learning for 2019. Because remember, he was actually campaigning 3 months even before the election dates were announced. He visited every region of Karnataka once before the dates were announced. Amit Shah was, of course, fully there, hands-on, but that's not new. That's how Amit Shah rolls. We know that. But to see Rahul Gandhi do that, and I think at last count, the data I have that he addressed 38 rallies in 25 districts during the campaign, compared to Modi, who did 21 rallies, which is fine, Prime Minister. And Amit Shah did 65. So he still did more. But for Rahul to campaign with that intensity is something that suggests a shift. And last, very quickly, the other shift, of course, is what we've seen already in Gujarat, that the Congress is also now playing this temple-run politics. And there's again some numbers on how many mutts and temples and whatnot that Rahul and Amit Shah visited. And the last count, it actually had Rahul visiting more. So by the end of it, maybe they've leveled off. I don't know. But I actually heard a little interesting nugget from somebody in the Congress data analytics team, because I asked him, I said, does this stuff help you? And he said to me that they actually found through their data polling that in Gujarat, it actually helped them. So I said, how? Like, how can you calculate that? So he said that basically they looked at the Congress's vote share, the Congress's performance in seats in districts where Rahul had visited temples and places, Hindu places of worship, and they found that there was a bump up which was higher than the Congress's overall strike rate in Gujarat. So there's something a little more granular that he got into, that it helps if he visits temples in the same district but not necessarily the same Lok Sabha seat, but I'm not very sure of that. But anyway, this is what he said. Whether we make that correlation or not, data gurus would have a better idea. But that's again something which was a shift. Again, keeping an eye on 2019.
Vasu mentioned about this temple hopping. See, there was a method to Rahul Gandhi's temple visits this time. It was not like in Gujarat. See, if you should just look at the temples he visited. It was hugely conforming to the Congress game plan. The first temple he visits is the Hulegamma temple in Hyderabad, Karnataka region. And it's a non-mainstream Hindu temple. Then he makes a surprise visit to the Yellamma temple, a temple of Devadasis. So, and then if you go to Mysore, he goes to the Malai Mahadeshwara temple. See, there was a pattern there. He was not going to mainstream Hindu temples, but he was going to these temples where the majority of the population, the lower classes, the backwards, had these gods as their personal gods. There is the concept of personal deity and the larger deity. So there is a Rama and Krishna that we think that is Hindutva. But I think he was playing it very intelligently. We should give it to him that he was trying to get beneath this thing and try and play a much bigger card. 2 gods versus 2.5 lakh gods. Sidramaya played this thing very intelligently. Sidramaya said, see, Rama is in my name, but my Rama is not your Rama. This was his initial statement, because his family god is called Siddharama. He comes from a small village called Siddharamanahundi. And he says, I may be a socialist and an atheist, but never once have I missed the jatra or the fair of my family god. So this was the strategy. So they were trying to actually play the backward class thing right, but the problem was Sidramaya should have gone a step ahead and converted that in ticket distribution and patronizing these other castes. That did not happen. That is where the failure was. And one small counter to what Madam was telling earlier, H.R. Bharadwaj, and let me just a factual thing. Mysore University has never had a Dalit vice chancellor, and the most corrupt man, the man who thrived under Bharadwaj, was someone called Rangappa, and Rangappa fought the assembly elections, and he is married. His daughter is married to Devegowda's grandson, Okkaliga, and it was a nexus between Brahmin Okkaliga nexus, not not the other way around. Because if you also go to the Mysore region now, the last 5 years there's a new icon building process that's happening. Very, very interesting. The Okkaligas say Vishweshwaraya is the greatest. So every family home should have a portrait of Vishweshwaraya because he built the dam. And that is what helps the Mandya region, Mysore region to be so prosperous. But the Congress people, that is Sidramaya and the socialists like that, have always opposed the Wadiyar family. And Vishweshwaraya, please remember, 1916 he was asked to leave the Divanship because there was the rise of the Okkaligas and Lingayats. And Mysore is not just Okkaligas, by the way. Mysore district is one strange district in Karnataka where there's an equal amalgam of Okkaligas, Lingayats and Dalits. Nanjangud, for instance, where they fought the by-elections, is an Okkaliga seat, Dalit seat. If you go 20 kilometers that side, the Gundlupet seat, which was lost, won in the by-election, lost now, held by Siddharamaya's very close aide, Mahadev Prasad, is a Lingayat seat. I mean, it's a very, Mysore therefore was, the Maharaja was sandwiched between Lingayat and Okkaliga politics. And they commission a Miller's commission. See, even Grierson report, we all talk about the caste thing. But the Maharaja commissions the Miller Commission report, which is a caste census actually of the Mysore region. So it's a very strange thing. And one other thing which, I think we should just go to the other.
So I'd like to.
One really small thing, and which is that in the interviews that I have, and that's a sandwiching of the Mysore Maharaja, Jamdar says, Mysore Maharaja was actually also a Lingayat. He was a Lingayat until the 13th century, then he converted to becoming a Vaishnav. So what we really have in the state is that the Lingayats brought about the thoughts of equality, and therefore the genes transmitted to Nalwadi Krishnaraj Vodiyar were perhaps from the Lingayat tradition, that were perhaps responsible for his taking the